He showed up on my doorstep smelling of whiskey and grief, the husband of the woman I called my friend. His eyes were red and swollen, not from a lack of sleep, but from the kind of long, soul-draining cry that leaves a person hollowed out. That was the moment my small, orderly world began to fracture. Hey everyone, and welcome back. Have you ever found yourself in a situation you never saw coming? One that blurs the lines between right and wrong, between loyalty and your own loneliness. Today's story is about a shock just like that. One open door that changed everything. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss a single compelling story. And if you're ready, press 1 in the comments below. My name is Amelia, and at 57, I thought I had life pretty much figured out. My world was built on simplicity and routine. I'd married young to Mark, a kind man whose smile always reached his eyes, and together we'd raised 2 wonderful children. When they grew up and left home, and after Mark passed away 9 years ago, the silence he left behind was deafening. I filled the empty days with rituals, gardening until my back ached, organizing books at the local library, and sharing harmless pleasantries with my neighbors over the picket fence. Drama was something I read about in books, not something I lived. I was certain that the chapter on love and longing in my life had been closed long ago, the pages yellowed and collecting dust. I had manufactured a peace for myself, a fortress built of predictable habits, but that fortress was about to be shaken to its very foundations. It started on an ordinary Tuesday evening. The late sun was casting a golden glow across my kitchen as I finished tidying up, still humming to an old tune on the radio. I was looking forward to a quiet evening with a good book and a cup of tea when a knock came at the door. I figured it must be my neighbor Claire coming back for the baking dish she'd left behind. She and her husband David had been over for dinner the night before, one of the cozy neighborhood traditions we'd kept alive over the years. We'd shared countless meals, laughs, and quiet confidences over the fence that separated our backyards. But when I opened the door, it wasn't Claire standing there. It was David, alone. He looked like a completely different person from the smiling man who had helped me jump-start my car last winter. David was normally the anchor of the neighborhood, the guy who always had a joke ready and a friendly wave. But the man standing before me now was coming apart. His hair was a mess, his shirt was wrinkled, and as I said, his eyes were a roadmap of misery. The scent of whiskey hung in the air between us, a sour note of desperation. "Amelia," he said, his voice a raw rasp. I didn't know where else to go. Instinct took over. I didn't think. I just acted. "Come in, David," I said, my voice softer than I felt. I pulled the door wider. He stepped inside, hesitant, and stood awkwardly in the middle of my living room, looking lost and uncertain, as if he were afraid he might soil the rug. He looked around the familiar room as if seeing it for the first time. I closed the door behind him, the click of the latch sounding unnaturally loud in the tense silence that fell over us. I waited, my heart beating a strange, apprehensive rhythm. After what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke, the words coming out on a heavy exhale. "She's gone." I blinked, processing. "She... You mean Claire?" He nodded, a slow, pained movement, swallowing hard. "This morning, packed a bag and said she was going to her sister's in Arizona. She said she needs time." Each of his words was like a small hammer blow to the foundation of the world I knew. David and Claire, they were the constant. They were the forever couple. They were best friends as much as they were husband and wife. Theirs was the comfortable, easy love, built on laughter and mutual respect. At least that's what I had always believed. David, I had no idea, I stammered. I didn't know you two were having trouble. Neither did I, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I thought we were fine. Do you want to sit down? I offered gently. He nodded again and sank onto the edge of my couch, his back straight and tense, as if he might need to flee at any moment. I took the armchair across from him, pulling my cardigan a little tighter around myself, though the room wasn't cold. There was a chill in the air, a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. I'm sorry for just showing up like this, he said, rubbing his hands together nervously. I didn't know who else to talk to. It's okay, I said, and I meant it. But underneath my sympathy, something else was stirring, a strange, tightening feeling in my chest. The air in the room felt thicker, heavy with unspoken things. She said she's been unhappy for years, David continued, his voice hoarse with suppressed emotion. That I've been too busy, too checked out, that I stopped seeing her. He looked up at me then, his eyes hollow and empty. Have you ever felt like you missed your cue, Amelia? Like you were supposed to say or do something different at a crucial moment, but you didn't? And now it's gone forever. His question struck me to the core. I knew that feeling of a slow drifting all too well. My own marriage to Mark in the final years before his illness had ended in silence, not with shouting matches and slammed doors. It had died in the absence. The kind of absence that starts with forgetting to say goodnight and ends with living separate lives under the same roof. I had become his caregiver, not his wife, and somewhere along the way, we had lost each other. I nodded slowly. More times than I'd like to admit. David leaned forward, elbows on his knees, sinking into his grief. I keep replaying all the little moments, the time she tried a new hairstyle and I didn't notice. The time she wanted to talk and I said I was too tired. They were like blinking lights I chose to ignore. I just thought she'd always be there. Silence fell in the room again. Outside, a wind chime tinkled lazily in the dusk breeze. I don't know how long we sat like that. Two lost souls adrift in memories of roads not taken and words left unsaid. But in that silence, something shifted. It was no longer just neighbor comforting neighbor. An unexpected intimacy bloomed, a resonance of shared sorrow. I could feel the weight of his grief mixing with my own loneliness, creating something new and alarming. I rose slowly. Let me make you some tea. He didn't answer, just nodded, his eyes fixed on the floor, as if afraid they would betray too much if he looked up. In the kitchen, my hands trembled as I filled the kettle. My heart was racing in a confusing way. Why was I feeling this? Was it the sudden intimacy of the moment, the raw vulnerability of a man I'd always seen as strong? Or was it because, for the first time in nearly a decade, I wasn't just seeing David as my neighbor's husband, I was seeing him as a man in pain? And that stirred something inside me, an echo of the person I used to be, a woman who had once been loved and desired. I brought the 2 mugs of tea into the living room, the clink of the ceramic on the coffee table, a small sound. The warm steam curled up between us, mingling with a silence that had become less awkward and more intimate. David looked up and offered a faint smile, tired but grateful. "Thank you, Amelia," he said softly. I settled back into my armchair, wrapping my fingers around my own mug, letting the heat ground me. The room was dim now, touched only by the warm orange glow of the lamp beside me, creating an intimate island sealed off from the rest of the world. He took a sip, then leaned back with a long, slow breath. "It's strange," he murmured. You spend years with someone, and when they're gone, the house doesn't even feel like yours anymore. Have you talked to anyone else? I asked, my voice gentle. A friend? Maybe your brother? He shook his head. I couldn't. It feels too real saying it out loud to them. With you, it's different. That sentence made my chest tighten. How is it different? I wanted to ask, but I didn't. I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. There was something about grief that made people reach for warmth in unexpected places. And there was something about being seen, truly seen, after years of feeling invisible, that made you feel like you were standing on the edge of something both dangerous and thrilling. David set his mug down and looked around the room, his gaze resting on the old wedding photo of Mark and me on the mantel. You haven't changed much in here since Mark passed, have you? The name, spoken aloud in this intimate space, hit me harder than I expected. No, I said quietly. Somehow I couldn't. You always seemed so peaceful, David said, his eyes returning to mine, like you'd made your peace with it all. I did, I said, though my voice didn't sound entirely convincing, even to me. Eventually, but I still have days where I walk into a room and expect him to be there. Days I set 2 places for dinner without even thinking. His eyes softened, a deep understanding passing through them. I've been watching you for years, you know, he confessed, his voice low. Not in a weird way, just noticing. The way you tend your garden, the way you talk to the birds, you always carried yourself like someone who had found calm after the storm. It gave me hope, I think. That compliment left me stunned. It was different. It wasn't about appearance or charm. It was about something deeper, something he had seen through the layers of defense I had carefully built around my heart for years. The silence stretched between us again, but this time it was charged, thick with unspoken possibilities. I should probably go, David finally said, breaking the spell. I didn't mean to stay this long. I stood with him, walking him to the door. As he stepped onto the porch, he paused and turned to me, his face torn, as if he were wrestling with a decision. Amelia, he began, then stopped. Last night, after dinner, I had this moment, watching you laugh, hearing your stories. I realized something. I haven't felt that kind of ease in a long, long time. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the quiet of the night. I opened my mouth to say something, but no words came out. He gave a sad, gentle smile. I'm sorry if that's out of line. I needed to say it. I stepped out onto the porch with him, the cool night air brushing against my arms. It's not out of line, I said, my voice barely a whisper. It's honest. We stood there just feet apart, not touching, not moving. In that moment, we weren't neighbors. We were 2 people seeing each other, maybe for the very first time. He gave a small, final nod, then walked down the steps and across the lawn to his own dark house. I stood and watched until his silhouette vanished behind the door. Then I stood there for a long moment more, my heart still racing, unsure of what line had just been crossed, but knowing deep down that something between us had changed forever, and I wasn't sure I could ever go back to pretending it hadn't. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have closed the door on his grief, or would you have opened it despite the risks? Let me know your thoughts by pressing 1 in the comments. The days that followed existed in a strange limbo. The world kept turning, but my own axis had shifted. Every time I looked out my kitchen window, I saw his house, and it was no longer just the neighbor's place. It was a place that held pain, a place that held a new possibility. David didn't come by every day. Sometimes it was just a wave from across the yard, or a nod when we crossed paths at the mailbox. But there was a silent understanding between us now, an invisible thread that had been strung. When he did come over, it was usually with a flimsy excuse, a box of old gardening books he'd found in his attic, a question about my tomato plants. But we both knew it wasn't about the books or the tomatoes. We'd sit at my kitchen table, our coffee growing cold as we talked. We talked about ordinary things, childhoods, first jobs, movies that made us cry. But underneath the simple conversations, something deeper was happening. We were building a bridge, plank by plank, across the chasm of our respective loneliness. One afternoon, as we were sitting there, he quietly reached across the table and touched my hand. It wasn't a romantic or demanding gesture. It was just a touch. Warm, real, a simple acknowledgement of presence. I froze for a second, not from fear, but from the sheer shock of the sensation. I hadn't realized how much I'd starved for a simple, human touch with no expectations. "I miss being near someone who listens," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Someone who sees me." And as I looked into his honest eyes, I didn't see Claire's husband anymore. I saw David, a man unraveling and rebuilding all at once. And something inside me, something that had been dormant for years, softened in response. "I see you," I whispered, and I did. Things might have continued like that, in this sweet, aching limbo, but life has a way of forcing your hand. One evening, about a week after his first visit, there was another knock on the door. This time, when I opened it, David looked different. The chaos in his eyes had been replaced by a sad calm, a resolution. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped back and he walked past me, standing in the middle of my living room with his hands in his pockets. "Claire called," he said without preamble. "She wants to talk." "We're going to meet next week, but I think it's just to make it official, to end it." A complex knot of emotions twisted inside me, sadness for the end of a long marriage, empathy for his pain, and a tiny, guilty spark of something that felt like relief. I pushed it down. "I'm sorry, David," I said, and I meant it. He nodded, looking out the window at the darkening yard. "The truth is, being here, talking with you, it's helped me face some things I'd been avoiding for years. It helped me realize our marriage was over long before she packed that bag." He turned back to face me. "Amelia, I don't know what this is. I don't know what it means yet, but being with you feels honest. Even when it's complicated, it's uncomplicated. You remind me that I'm still human, still capable of feeling something real." My throat tightened. He wasn't asking for a promise. He wasn't looking for a replacement. He was simply offering the truth. "I'm not looking for a replacement," I said, stepping closer to him, "and I'm not expecting answers. But I do know what it feels like to sit across from someone and not feel alone anymore." He didn't say anything. He just reached out again, that same quiet, familiar gesture, and his hand found mine. This time, I didn't hesitate. I laced my fingers through his. We sat down on the couch together, not in a fiery passion, but in a quiet safety. I rested my head on his shoulder, and he gently rested his cheek against the top of my head. The cicadas hummed outside, and a warm breeze carried the scent of lilac through the open window. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to begin or grieving something that had ended. I just felt here, present, alive. When he left that night, he kissed my cheek just once, a soft, tender kiss that was full of meaning. And as I stood at the door, watching him disappear into the dark, I didn't feel shaken anymore. I felt still. I felt seen. Maybe this wasn't a love story in the traditional sense. Maybe it wasn't the beginning of something new, but a return to myself. A return to the present. It taught me that sometimes the most unexpected connections don't come to replace what we've lost, but to reawaken the parts of us that have been asleep. They come to remind us that even after the longest storms, there is still the possibility of peace, of warmth, and of a reason to open the door one more time. Did this story resonate with you? If it did, press 1 in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories that make you think. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time.